you know, you might need the amplification.
Oh, sorry.
Thanks, Cal. I'm surprised he didn't say it.
I'm being nice.
Insert my foot in my mouth.
Thank you. That's very sweet of you. So first, I would like to welcome everyone and thank you on behalf of the Wagner family for coming today for my mother, Sence Ann O'Brien Wagner's memorial. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, great. For those of you that don't know, I am the daughter of Jim and Sence Wagner, the youngest of their 3 children, Jim, Mike, and Penny. And perhaps some of you don't realize that my real name is Sence Esther. I was named after both my grandmothers. I'm the 4th Sence, and because when I was born, my mother was Big Sence, and I was Little Sence, and my father coined the nickname Penny. So yeah, who was this?
I did it,
yeah. I know, you coined it.
Okay, you said your father, I was thinking, no, Paul did not do that.
Okay, so who was this Sence Ann O'Brien? Well, she was born Breach on November 8th, 1931 at 10:58 a.m. to Harry Joseph O'Brien and Sence Petersberger O'Brien at Norwegian American Hospital in Chicago. She was an only child and grew up at 3637 Sayre Avenue in Chicago. In 6th grade, she met a girl named Joan Quasigrub. They became best friends, or BFFs, because they shared a common bond. Neither of them had gone through puberty yet, and therefore neither wore a bra. At least this is the story that my mom told all the time. A few years later, she met a 14-year-old boy named Jim Wagner. She didn't really like him, especially since he played a bad joke on her at a party. He asked her if she wanted a lollipop kiss. She said yes. She closed her eyes and puckered up. He said, "Sucker." Amazingly, I don't understand why, but she continued to date him. They would go ice skating at Shabona Park. Unfortunately, my dad did not have skates of his own, but eventually he was able to borrow some. In the meanwhile, he just slid around on his shoes, chasing after her. At the tender age of 18, she got married. My dad was 19 at the time, and guys had to be 20, so his mother had to go sign for him. They were married on June 17th, 1950 at St. Priscilla's Church in Chicago, half a block down the street from her home. Her best friend, Joni, was her maid of honor, and my dad's eldest brother, Vern, was their best man. Mom was raised Episcopalian, but in order to get married in the Catholic Church, she converted to Catholicism. My grandma Esther was so pleased. She treated my mother like the daughter that she never had. At the age of 20, she and my dad moved out to Oceanside, California, because my dad had enlisted in the Marines for the Korean War.
I got drafted.
Oh, you got drafted. Okay, I'll correct that. Okay. It was in Oceanside at Camp Pendleton Base that my mother gave birth to her first son, James Bryan Wagner. And by the way, the Bryan is B-R-I-E-N after her O'Brien. Same with my son. It seems my mother had a very good pain tolerance. The day she went into labor, she and my dad hitchhiked from their trailer park to the hospital. The naval corpsman told my mom and dad that it was not the day. My dad left my mom at the hospital to go to the base. When he called later to check on her, she had already given birth. She said she was laying on a cart in this large ward with other women laying on gurneys, and she could hear them moaning. They had given her an enema because, well, of course you can't have a baby without an enema, and she had to waddle down the hallway in her hospital gown with her behind hanging out. This, of course, mortified her because she was very modest. It was a short time later that she felt the baby coming, and when they pulled back the sheets, little Jimmy was on his way. Shortly after Jimmy's birth, my dad was shipped off to Korea, and my mom and brother flew back home to live with her parents. She would write to my dad and even baked him some cookies. My father quickly wrote back to her not to send any more cookies because his drill sergeant forced him to eat all of them at one sitting in front of the other Marines. My father had an honorable discharge, or was that dishonorable? No, honorable.
You're a smart
An honorable discharge from the Marines and moved back to Chicago. Upon arriving home, my dad had the pleasure of looking at little Jimmy's baby book. They're all over there if you care to look. He was shocked to see some sort of dried leathery stump and a brown scab of some sort. Oh, no. Very proudly, my mom explained that it was little Jimmy's umbilical cord stump that had dried up and fallen off in his vaccination scab. My father told her to throw them out. She reluctantly obliged.
Oh, no, shame to me, I put them back in.
No, I don't think so. But she was allowed to keep his first haircut and his first lost baby tooth. In May of 1954, they purchased a small home at 2948 North Sandra in the far western suburbs for the price of $10,500. It wasn't really even a suburb yet. Lots of open fields with gravel roads and septic tanks. My mom continued her friendship with her BFF, Joni. Mom always said that whenever Joni would get pregnant, then she had to get pregnant too. Joan and Wendell were our pseudo-aunts and uncle. They had their eldest son, Gary, who's a little bit older than my brother, Jim. Their daughter, Wendy, is just a little less than a year older than my brother, Mike. And Holly is about a year and a half older than me. My mom said it took a long time to get pregnant with me. My dad was busy building an addition on their house. She said that she would track her fertility by her basal body temperature. My mom was aware of this because the Catholic Church taught fertility awareness as a way to prevent pregnancy since no other forms of birth control were allowed. But this could also be used as a way to get pregnant. My dad was busy hammering away, building the addition, and she would run out and say, "Jim, Jim, it's time, I'm fertile." And that is how I was conceived. When my mom went into labor, she had to finish washing and ironing the maternity clothes that she had borrowed from Joni. They stopped to have coffee with Joni and then proceeded on to Resurrection Hospital. I was born about an hour later at 1:49 p.m. See, I told you she had a good pain tolerance. My mom tells me she was thrilled when I was born and the doctor told her, "It's a girl." See, this was before ultrasounds and everyone knowing what they're going to have ahead of time. She said, "I had rosebud lips and I was perfect." For those of you that don't know, my mom had OCD. She had a place for everything and everything in its place. If you had a glass of water that you were drinking and set it down next to you, it would not be there for long. She would see the half-full glass, take it, wash it, and put it back in the cabinet before you had a chance to get your next sip. We were raised Catholic, attending St. John Vianney School. Each morning, my mom would get up and prepare breakfast for all of us. Each day of the week was a certain meal. Mondays were pancakes, Tuesdays French toast, Wednesdays cream of wheat, Thursdays scrambled eggs, and Friday oatmeal. Again, this was part of her OCD.
You knew what day it was by what breakfast was.
Mom was a devout Catholic. She went to church every Saturday evening at 5 p.m. come rain or shine. Our home was probably not much different from the typical middle-class American home. My mom was nurturing and rarely lost her temper. Well, except for that time my brother did something to upset her and she swore, "Damn it to hell and son of a bitch." You knew it was bad when she said that. My mom loved to cook, crochet, knit, sew, and read. When I was little, my mom would darn our socks. Now, most of you probably don't know what that even is. See, when you get a hole in your sock, what do you do with it? You throw it out, right? Not my mom. She knew how to repair it by weaving thread over the hole. I'm sorry to say, I am no match for her skill. She was also an avid crossword puzzle player. She and her neighbor Judy would do the crossword in the newspaper every day. Judy would call her up when she was stuck on a word. Judy was always so impressed when my mom had all the answers. Little didn't Judy know my mom Googled the ones she didn't know. In 1981, I met a cute guy in the checkout line at the Jewel Grand Bazaar in Franklin Park. We ultimately dated, but we had a very on-again and off-again relationship. It was during one of these off-again episodes that my mother called me to tell me that the precinct captain, Paul Feldman, had come knocking on her front door.
What was that, Penny?
Paul came knocking on the door as
Okay.
precinct captain. He wasn't really there to try to convince her who to vote for, but instead, he was there to get the sympathy vote by showing her the scar on his knee from the surgery he recently had. My mom always loved Paul and encouraged our relationship. When Paul finally got the full-time job at the North Lake Fire Protection District in 1985, it was my mom who cut out the article from the Herald and gave it to me. I still have that article somewhere. The rest, they say, is history. My mom had some funny little quirks. She always had a Kleenex on hand. Actually, it was tucked up a sleeve for easy access. She had allergies and therefore was always in need of a Kleenex. Her favorite music was Barbra Streisand, favorite song Rhapsody in Blue, and she loved musicals like Singing in the Rain, South Pacific, and Fiddler on the Roof. She loved the Love Is and Family Circle cartoons. She used to cut them out and hang them on a bulletin board in the kitchen. She smelled like Lily of the Valley or gardenia, which my brother would bring from Hawaii. Her favorite thing to eat was split pea soup, which my brother Mike always made for her when he came home. She suffered from migraine headaches, which her mother also had, and which many in our family suffer from. My brother Mike, myself, her grandchildren Kelly and Jimmy, and my son Mike also. She had adult onset diet-controlled diabetes. She was very careful about what she ate, and she checked her sugars regularly. And she walked Monday through Friday with her neighbor lady friend Judy. My mom was very smart. In fact, she was valedictorian of her 8th grade class, which she would occasionally remind us all. She was an introvert, unlike my father or myself. She rarely wore makeup. Every morning, she would wake us up singing, "Good morning, good morning. We danced the whole night through. Good morning to you." If you didn't know better, I would have said Debbie Reynolds was in my bedroom singing. When we came home from school, she would ask, "Did you get lots of smiley angels?" See, at the Catholic school, that's how they graded us. Either you got a bad grade and that was a devil, or you got a smiley angel.
Oh my God.
She also had a favorite finger. It just so happened to be her middle finger. No, she didn't use it in a profane way, but when she pushed up her glasses, it was with her middle finger. When she would clean off the beaters of cake mix, it was with her middle finger. She says it was because it was her longest finger and therefore more practical. My mom was gentle, patient, and kind. But I think the thing I will remember her most for was her sense of humor. I think I get my sense of humor from her. It was an unusual annual tradition that April Fool's jokes were played between her and my brother Jim. Usually these jokes backfired one way or another. One year, Jim and the kids drove out with squirt guns and water balloons. They went to the side door, or maybe it was the front door, but unfortunately my dad was going out and got sprayed with said squirt guns and hit with water balloons. Needless to say, he wasn't happy. Another year, she called me up and asked if she could borrow some poop. You see, I have dogs. She came over and gathered some poop and drove out to Jim's house in Hanover Park. She drove out there and smeared dog poop on his front doorknob. Unfortunately, when Jim came home, the kids saw him pull into the driveway. They greeted him and opened the front door for him, thus avoiding him having to grab the doorknob. A short time later, Cheryl and her mother came home. As the story goes, Jim's mother-in-law, Doris, grabbed the doorknob and twisted. She realized something was on her hand. She looked, she smelled, she started gagging. Doris had a very strong gag reflex. Doris proceeded to vomit. I'm sorry to say, but my mother derived way too much pleasure from picturing this. My mom was a Democrat. My parents have some finches, which my mother named Bill and Hillary.
Oh my God.
There was a third bird, which my mom named Monica. Monica had an untimely death. We suspect Hillary had something to do with it. Some of my fondest memories of our vacations and camping in our small trailer. We traveled across much of America and even into Canada. In about 1979, they decided to park their trailer permanently on peaceful Mason Lake in Briggsville, Wisconsin. Nearly every weekend from May through the fall colors of October, you could find my parents up there. It was with the ladies at the campground that they would go to every imaginable craft show. My mom was always buying little knickknacks with funny little sayings and handmade sweatshirts. Every one of her grandchildren has fond memories of campfires, s'mores, and fishing in Grandpa's boat, tubing, and water skiing. Another one of my mom's hobbies was photography. We must have at least 30 photo albums of her pictures. Because she enjoyed taking pictures so much, my dad thought he would get her a digital camera for their 50th wedding anniversary. I convinced my dad that an anniversary ring would be much more romantic. And so as they stood on the altar, renewing their vows, my dad surprised my mother, reached into his top suit coat pocket, and pulled out the diamond anniversary ring and placed it on her finger. Her eyes were as big as saucers. She was thrilled. Good job, Dad. You pulled it off.
That'll screw everything up.
No, she thought you were romantic that day. Christmas would not be Christmas without my mom's Christmas cookies. Every year she would make dozens of cookies. All of her grandchildren spent time making cookies with her. My son Paul even video recorded her making these cookies and titled it Grandma's Cookies. About 5 to 6 years ago, she told us it was just getting too difficult for her to do anymore. Our family split up the recipes, and we now share the baking to carry on my mother's tradition. And no eulogy of my mother would be complete without a mention of her being a certified, card-carrying, die-hard Cubs fan. I personally think this meant she was certifiably insane, but she always counted on next year. And who knows, maybe 2015 is the year.
She has something to do with the Lester signing, I'm telling you.
Okay, maybe. Her and Esther are working it up there. Mom always had her TV Guide magazine. She would review it to see what interesting programs would be on the upcoming week. She would highlight and circle the important shows she didn't want to miss. Now, my mom and I spoke on the phone several times a week, but sometimes it was several times a day. We would both watch Survivor and American Idol and call each other up to discuss who we thought was going to get voted off and who we were going to vote for. My mom was a dog lover. It seems we always had a dog growing up, mostly boxers. There was Fawn, then Duke, then Rhodey. There might be other ones I don't remember.
Wrigley.
No, oh, Wrigley, yes. Well, I'm getting to that part of the story.
Okay.
After I moved out, they didn't have a dog for a long time. My mom said for years that she wanted a dog, but my dad was not thrilled with the idea. But in May of 2013, I called my dad and I told him there was a stray dog that no one was claiming, and it was theirs if he wanted to surprise my mom. The vet thought she was a Yorkie Poodle mix, maybe 6 to 7 years old. Surprisingly, my dad said yes. I picked her up from the vet's office and brought her over. My mom was elated. We decided to name her Wrigley, after Wrigley Field, of course. Wrigley would lay in bed with my mom and sit on her lap and cuddle. She was with her until the very end. My mom was tough. I only saw her cry once in my entire life. In her 70s, she was having severe back pain, not the 70s, but her age 70s, having severe back pain, making it difficult for her to do her walking with her neighbor lady friend Judy, so she had a lumbar fusion. I didn't see her cry once with this. In January of 2011, at the age of 79, she broke her right hip and needed surgery to place a pin. Oftentimes, when a senior falls and breaks a hip, they never walk again. Not my mom. She was up again with the help of a walker. In June of 2012, she fractured her left ankle, breaking both tibia and fibula. The x-rays were frightening. Mom recovered and was able to walk again. I'm telling you, my mom was very tough. Now, as some of you may know, some of you may not, my brother Mike was gay. In 1977-78, I was 17 years old and a senior in high school. Up until this point, I had never heard of homosexuality. But at that time at West Leiden, all seniors were required to take a class called Contemporary Problems. One of contemporary society's problems I learned was homosexuality. It was then that I realized that my brother Mike was gay. I came home and asked my mom, and she confirmed my suspicions. Now, having a gay son in the 60s, 70s, 80s wasn't an easy thing. It was something you certainly did not talk about with your neighbors or relatives or in eulogies. You would think that my father, the tough Marine, would have disowned his gay son, but he didn't. In fact, he always welcomed Mike and his partner into their home. He really didn't give a, insert expletive, what others thought. Unfortunately, my mother did. She was always worried what her friends, family, and neighbors would think or say. She worried a lot. So when we had family gatherings, Mike would bring a female companion that gave the appearance that he was straight. When Mike lived in Chicago, he lived down near Belmont Avenue in the heart of Boys Town. When people asked where Mike lived and my father would tell them, they would say, "Oh, a bunch of fags live down there." People can be so rude. Ultimately, Mike moved away, first San Francisco, then Seattle, and finally Honolulu. Finally, my mother had enough of the charade. In 2000, my parents were about to celebrate their 50th wedding anniversary. The year preceding the anniversary, they made a point of inviting various friends and family out to dinner, those that would be invited to their anniversary luau. It was at these dinners, I say, that my mother came out. My brother had been out since his 20s. Most people were not shocked at all by the news. Most said they figured he was. Only one person told her she did not approve and that it was a sin. I feel sorry for anyone that thinks that way. You see, people that make comments like, "God made Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve," probably don't even realize the impact on gay individuals and their family members that love them. Such comments are not funny, but rather they're cruel. And let me tell you, every one of those comments was like a knife to my mother's heart. If only they realized that their fears and comments were as hurtful as they were. You see, my mother felt guilty that Mike was gay. When she first found out, she worried that perhaps it was her fault. Maybe the way she raised him caused this. You see, none of us, including Mike, blame my mom for his homosexuality, or my dad, no more than you would blame me for my brown eyes. It just was. She clung to every bit of news about why some people were gay. She even spoke to a priest about it who helped her to heal. And with time, she realized it wasn't something she did, but rather just who he was, and was able to forgive herself and move on. And so, at the age of 68, my mother welcomed her gay 45-year-old son and his partner Bill to be present at their 50th wedding anniversary and in our family portraits. I was so proud of you, Mom. Bill, you really are a part of our family, and you will be always welcome in our homes. On August 18, 2014, my brother Michael took his life with an overdose of prescription medications. Unbeknownst to us, he was very depressed. He had just been in Chicago visiting us August 6th through August 10th. Initially, the news of this was very shocking to my mother. She kept saying over and over that she couldn't believe it, that it seemed like a dream. After I returned from Honolulu, from Mike's memorial in October with Mike's urn, she sunk into a deep depression. It was difficult for us to tell if she had forgotten Mike had died due to her dementia, or if she just wasn't talking about it because it was too painful and she was depressed. She lay in bed with her eyes closed, tapping her fingers, thinking about Mike. My mother had recurrent urinary tract infections. The week after my brother's death in August, my mother had another bladder infection. She went in for further testing in September, and we were told she might have bladder cancer. Fortunately, all the biopsies came back negative, but unfortunately, the procedure perforated her bladder. She was in severe pain and hospitalized for 8 days. During this time, she could barely eat, and she became very weak. She went to Villa Scalabrini in Northlake for rehab with the goal to walk again. She was highly motivated because she knew she had to do this in order to come home. It was while at physical therapy that the physical therapist asked her, "How many daughters do you have?" She said 1. When he asked her how many sons she had, She looked at me and asked, "Does Mike count since he's dead?" She admitted to me that day that she did indeed remember that Mike was dead, that she was sad and depressed because of it, and she thought about him all the time like I did. Her bladder finally healed, but her heart never did. We brought my mom home on November 17th. She had barely eaten anything since her procedure on October 16th, and she had lost over 20 pounds in a month. She was home for 12 days, and as per her wishes, she died peacefully at home without any extraordinary measures taken in her bedroom of 60 years with Wrigley and family members at her side. My mother had always planned on being buried at Mount Emblem Cemetery, where her parents are buried. My parents even had plots there. She never wanted to be cremated because, as she explained, it looked painful. But in 2010, when her best friend Joni Pearson passed away and was cremated, she decided, well, if Joni could do it, she could do it too. So, although the ending to my mother's life sounds tragic, she lived a good, long, happy life. She lived to see her children grow up, her grandchildren marry, to hold her great-grandchildren. She's at peace now, and she is with her mother, Sence, her father, Harry, her mother-in-law, Esther, father-in-law, George, and her best friend, Joni. But most importantly, she is with her amazingly talented, creative, intelligent, funny, sensitive son, Michael Jerome Wagner. Please take good care of her, Mike. It's your turn now. Thank you for coming. There's a video also, if anyone wants to say the video my brother created for my mom, Mother's Day of 2013. Jim would like to say something too.